Big game this week. Big game this week. I always check out the matchup predictor on ESPN.com, even though I'm completely befuddled by it.
Can we guess?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the 3-3 Commanders taking on the 1-5 New York Giants. And just to give you context, I know that Daniel Jones didn't play last week. I don't see him listed on the current injury report. So I got to assume that means he's playing. So
I think it'll be
take that for whatever
pretty
it's
close.
worth.
I'd say it's 54% Commanders.
JP?
61% Commanders.
JP nailed it, 61.
Oh, wow. All right.
61-38, however that works out. 61.4 and 38.3. I don't think that's quite 100, but I guess they got some ties in there. Maybe they got some ties in there.
Yeah, I guess so. 0.3%
Because they did have a tie last year.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyway, interesting game. We've talked about it. The Giants have struggled to score, obviously. Their one win was against Arizona, September 17th. That was
the come-from-behind win.
After Washington.
That was our survivor pick.
Beat Arizona. Since then, they lost 30-12 to San Francisco, 24-3 to Drabby Seahawks, 31-16 to Joe P's Dolphins, and I would say a borderline moral victory with the 14-9 loss to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm. With a chance to win it.
Right. And then, we all know that there is, I guess, a penalty that they could have called. You had the debacle before halftime. So certainly
they could have called
things,
the pass interference in the end zone.
Certainly some
play.
things to build on there for the Giants. Not going to be a walkover by any stretch.
What do you have to say about people claiming that the Bills, they played over in London, and the travel back and forth is kind of why they were
flat.
lethargic, flat, sleepy. There's a lot of teams take a bye after their London game.
Yeah, for some reason they didn't want
to. The Bills opted not to do that.
I didn't even know. I learned that this week, that teams have that choice now.
Let's see how the Ravens play this week. Aren't the Ravens playing?
Are
they playing Detroit?
Yes, they're playing Detroit at home.
Because I think Harbaugh also declined.
Harbaugh also declined the bye.
Because guys just want the byes later towards the playoffs?
I think sometimes teams that have playoff aspirations want their bye later in the season.
Yeah, makes sense. I would buy that. I would buy that as a possible factor.
Especially because didn't the Bills go over on like Friday? I think the Bills went over on Friday, played on Sunday, came back, and then had the night game. They basically lost a day and a half.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they looked horrible against the Jags. Now, to be fair, the Jags, they came back and played really well.
Mm-hmm. Now, just a little context here. And then I want to get into Eric Eager, who was on with Grant yesterday. Actually, I heard him as I made a quick trip to Safeway. And I was kind of interested in the conversation we've had for a while. But on the Commander side, Charles Leno's still listed as questionable. Obviously, we're thinking about the family. Hopefully, they can find some peace there, and he could get back out on the field. Although I did think Cornelius Lucas, from a football perspective, did pretty well in his stead.
He did better than pretty well. I saw Pro Football Focus says he didn't give up a sack, didn't give up a pressure.
Mm. Who do you have the PFF scores?
I do. I have the defensive grades in front of me. In terms of the starters and every down players, Jamin Davis got the highest grade defensively. He graded out at 82.8. When was the last time he's gotten that high of a grade? Mm. I'm not sure he ever has.
He had the game-clinching interception.
His first
just
career
that itself was huge.
He had two guys get their first career interceptions. And we talked about it yesterday. Think about it. St. Jude's didn't get one in college. That's his first interception since high school.
Right.
I'm assuming he got some in high school.
I would assume.
It was also Desmond Ritter's first loss at home since high school.
Oh, there you go. We talked about that going into the game. Kendall Fuller also had a good game. Got back on the winning track there after a tough week before that. Casey Toohill. I think Casey Toohill, listen, I've always said, like when he replaced Chase, when Chase was out, I always thought that the defense did fine. And, he made plays, but he never really stood out to me the way he did on Sunday.
Yeah.
I thought he was outstanding. And we talked to Keim about it, and I guess it's just been well known there amongst coaches what a great athlete he was and we all saw that. So that's why that guy's been around for a few years here and has filled in admirably at times, and he got a very high grade. Cody Barton had his best game. Kalike Hudson, all of a sudden, was out there, and he made some big plays, including that big stop there, right, in the two-point conversion. He and Jonathan Allen. Cam Curl. Chase had another pretty solid game.
What was Chase's number?
Chase, 66. You know, for him,
I guess because he had some pressures, right?
Yeah. And then let's go. Offensively, Terry McLaurin, who was targeted early and often. He was their highest-rated offensive player. Curtis Samuel, Brian Robinson, Sam Howell, Antonio Gibson, and then amongst offensive linemen, Cornelius Lucas. He was the highest-rated offensive lineman. The bottom of the pack there, Jahan Dotson, lowest-rated offensive player. He was only targeted the one time, right, and had to drop.
So is he not getting open?
I don't know.
He must not be getting open because they theoretically are not just grading the plays that we see on TV. They're grading every play.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he was out there for 27 pass plays.
I had a theory on this. You think about the Chiefs, okay, and think about Bieniemy's offense with the Chiefs. If you're assuming Bieniemy's the one that's installing the plays and calling plays,
I think that's fair to assume
that with Bieniemy, it's the tight end, and then it was your star wide receiver, Tyreek Hill. So I think maybe he's using Jahan as like decoy or clear out, not necessarily trying to get him open. And then you're kind of targeting those two positions. Your wide receiver one, which would be McLaurin, and then your tight end.
Makes sense. Possible. I buy it.
That Dots is not necessarily running routes to get open, but kind of running routes to clear out an area or set up a play to go at one place instead of the other.
Right.
Not necessarily part of the progression.
Well, if that is the case, then he certainly has to catch the balls when he only has the one thrown to him.
Yeah, I think they got to target him a little more, but I think there might be something to be said for that, Valdez. I don't hate the theory. It looks like 3 of the bottom 6 or so are offensive linemen, though. Sadiq Charles, I think he's played pretty well at times. He was their second lowest rated player according to PFF. Sam Cosmi was down there, and Andrew Wiley, of course. And Nick Gates not that much higher. So the O-line not getting super great grades from PFF for their performance last week. And, of course, Sam was sacked another 5 times.
That didn't affect his PFF score too much.
Yeah, I mean, he was fairly highly rated. Let me see. If I go by position, let's see where Sam ranked this week.
I guess middle of the pack. I could be wrong. He did have 3 touchdowns, no turnovers.
Yeah, let me see. I don't want to do the season. I just want to do. You know what, Drab? Can you figure that out? It's a little hard for me to do it on the fly. Just the week.
Where he ranked
Sam
amongst quarterbacks
for the week according to PFF? See if you can find that for me. But Eric Eager was on with Grant yesterday. I thought it was fascinating. He's a former PFF guy. I can't remember who he works for now. So he's like a stats nerd. And we'll play the audio. But the gist of it is Eager has kind of gone on record, even though Sam's only played 7 career games. He's deciding, and this is purely just based on an analytical perspective, that guys that get sacked that much can't be starters in this league. And that it's a sticky, you'll hear him talk about it, it's a sticky stat. It's one that doesn't change very much. He did give the example of Justin Herbert, who was sacked a ton in college and then improved at the pro level, but he says it's rare. He says he'd be a high-quality backup. But here's Eric Eager, and I know this irritates a lot of scouts. I want to say for the record that if it's true he gets sacked this rate, then he won't be a starter. I think that we can coach him out of some of this and build around him. But here's Eric Eager's perspective.
If I'm putting together an ideal team from scratch, I'm probably not looking his way. However, if I have a starter in place, I think he's a good backup. I watched the New York Giants game the other day. Tyrod Taylor's a completely different kind of player in that he'll never embarrass you, but I don't necessarily know if he can beat the great teams. I think that Sam Howell can beat a great team if he catches some fire. but he can also probably lose to any team in the NFL, as they showed against Chicago. So that he's a high variance player I want as a backup, because if I'm down, if I'm down to a chip or two at the poker table, I kind of want a guy that can win a big hand. But at the same time, can he be my starter year in and year out? That's kind of a no. So yeah, he probably will be a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. But there's like Jacoby Brissett's a top 32 quarterback in the NFL. He just happens to be the Washington backup right now. Like, that's kind of just how the cookie crumbles in the NFL.
So I listened to the entire thing, and the whole premise is he acknowledges he makes some great throws. If you take sacks out of the equation, he looks really, really good. But when you get sacked at such an alarming rate, there's clearly something in his opinion that just isn't there, that isn't clicking, and it's really hard to get out of it.
He said it hasn't clicked.
He did say that Justin Herbert has gotten out of it to an extent.
The hard part is to overcome the yardage.
Almost a record rate. You're just setting the offense back significantly. And in the day and age now where we live, where all the too high safeties, teams have fewer possessions every game than they used to as well. And if you kill one of those possessions with a 2nd and 17 or even like a sack on 3rd down, you knock yourself out of field goal range. It's all those hidden points that, you're just not going to play winning football that way. And unfortunately, I think Howell is susceptible to that.
So the hard part is the yardage. So they have lost on these sacks 215 yards through 6 games. Mm-hmm. So like he says, when you're putting yourself in those positions, it's really tough to overcome.
Yeah.
So and sometimes that leads to more sacks. Like he gave up back-to-back sacks because, you get sacked on 1st down. All of a sudden it's 2nd and 17. Now they know you're dropping back, so they can bring pressure. And now your routes a lot of times are going to be longer unless you're playing, unless you're really deciding, hey, it's going to take 2 downs. Let's just get 5 yards here. And then it puts yourself in tougher positions.
It's possible he's just a guy that just gets sacked. It happened to him in college, and it's just going to always happen to him. It's possible. But I also think, and Grant mentioned this to his credit, that you can build up the offensive line around him to mitigate some of this.
Right.
Okay? Right. When you look at some of the all-time great players, at this point, I think they're probably the most sacked quarterbacks in history. Ben Roethlisberger and Tom Brady. And their rate is fairly high, too. Yeah. Phil Simms, I would say, would you not kill for Phil Simms' career if you were a young quarterback?
Yeah, of course.
Phil Simms was sacked 9.3% of the time. That's not that far off from where Hal is. Now Hal's obviously got to get better.
Those are also 3 quarterbacks who were immobile.
True. Drew,
and I actually
Aaron
think
Rodgers' sack rate as of 2020. I don't have
Aaron Rodgers sacked a lot.
He is close to 7.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Sam right now is crazy. It's like 12 or something.
Aaron Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks that always would take the sack over throwing the ball up to get picked.
Right.
Because if you look at his pick numbers, they were always in the single digits.
Very, very low. Yeah. And by the way, I think you will see that trend. Take away that Buffalo game, you'll see that trend continue with Hal.
Right.
His turnover-worthy plays are fairly low. So I think you could build around this because, let's be honest, that offensive line, there's no Hall of Famers in there. There's no anchor in that offensive. That offensive line is kind of a joke.
Whoever's running the team next year, that's got to be their sole focus.
Build the offensive line around him, coach him up a little bit, get the number more manageable, and I think you've got something. So yeah. I think that's Eager making that call in a vacuum. Personally, I think it's unfair. His point is well taken. If you get sacked at a 12% rate, you can't be a starter in this league. I get it, but I think you can improve that number.
Let's see how it.
I don't think it will be that hard to improve it to get it into an Aaron Rodgers level.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers.
Let's see how it progresses, or maybe it won't, but how it progresses over the next.
Here's how it'll progress. You coach him up a little bit, and you get a better offensive line around him.